The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the desert landscape as Jake Sullivan guided his horse, Thunder, along the rocky trail toward the McCready Ranch. The year was 1885, and the territory was still wild and unforgiving, where a man's worth was measured by his character and his ability to survive, not by the contents of his wallet. Jake had been working cattle for the McCready brothers for 3 years now, earning an honest living as a cowboy after drifting west from Missouri following the war. At 28, he was lean and weathered, with calloused hands and eyes the color of sage that had seen both beauty and hardship in equal measure. As Thunder picked his way through the sagebrush, Jake heard something that made him rein in his mount. The distant sound of snarling and a woman's terrified screams echoing off the canyon walls. "Easy, boy," he murmured to Thunder, spurring the horse toward the commotion. What he found around a bend in the trail made his blood run cold. A woman in a torn traveling dress was backed against a boulder, wielding a broken tree branch as 4 coyotes circled her with hungry intent. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins, and her face was streaked with dust and fear, but she stood her ground with more courage than most men Jake had known. Without hesitation, Jake drew his Colt .45 and fired 2 shots into the air. The coyotes scattered like tumbleweeds in a strong wind, disappearing into the desert as quickly as they had appeared. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" Jake called out, dismounting and approaching slowly so as not to frighten her further. The woman sagged against the boulder, her makeshift weapon falling from trembling hands. I think I'm all right. Thank you, sir. I thought I was going to die out here." Jake got his first good look at her and felt his breath catch. Even disheveled and frightened, she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Her dress, though torn and dusty, was made of fine fabric with delicate lace trim, the kind of clothing that cost more than Jake earned in 6 months. But it was her eyes that held him captive, deep blue like mountain lakes, intelligent and spirited despite her ordeal. "What in tarnation are you doing out here alone, miss? This ain't country for a lady to be wandering around in. My horse threw me about a mile back. I was trying to walk to town when those creatures found me." She looked around the desolate landscape with new appreciation for its dangers. "I'm afraid I'm quite lost." Jake noticed she spoke with refinement, her words carefully chosen and properly pronounced. "Definitely not from around these parts." "Well, you're safe now. Name's Jake Sullivan. I work for McCready Ranch, about 5 miles north of here." "I'm Beth," she said, stumbling slightly over the name. "Beth Wilson. I'm new to the territory." Jake tipped his hat. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Wilson, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Let me get you back to the ranch. Mrs. McCready will want to look after you, and we can send word to town about your horse." As Jake helped her up on the Thunder behind him, he caught a whiff of expensive perfume mixed with the honest scent of desert dust. Her hands, when they gripped his belt for balance, were soft as silk, not the hands of a woman accustomed to hard work. "What brings you to Arizona territory, Miss Wilson?" Jake asked as they rode toward the ranch. "I'm looking for work, as a governess or school teacher." The lie came easier than Elizabeth Hartwell had expected. In truth, she was the daughter of railroad magnate Charles Hartwell, who had sent her Arizona under protection of armed guards to survey potential routes for his expanding empire. But this morning, frustrated by her suffocating life of privilege and constant supervision, she had slipped away from her hotel in Tucson to experience freedom for the first time in her 23 years. "Well, the McCreadys might could use some help with their youngest boy's schooling," Jake said. "Bobby's 8 and sharp as a tack, but there ain't no proper school for miles around." As they rode to the gathering dusk, Elizabeth found herself relaxing against Jake's broad back. For the first time in her life, she felt genuinely safe, not because of money or guards or social position, but because of the quiet strength of the man who had risked his life to save hers. The McCready Ranch appeared ahead of them like an oasis, a modest wooden house with a wide porch, surrounded by corrals and outbuildings. Smoke rose from the chimney, and warm lamplight spilled from the windows. It was simple and unpretentious, but it radiated the kind of honest prosperity that came from hard work and integrity. "Tom, Mary," Jake called as they approached. "Got someone here who needs help." Tom McCready emerged from the barn, a man in his 40s with graying hair and kind eyes. His wife, Mary, appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron, her face immediately creasing with concern when she saw Elizabeth. "Goodness gracious, what happened?" Mary exclaimed, hurrying forward as Jake helped Elizabeth down from the horse. "Found her being hassled by coyotes about 5 miles south," Jake explained. "Horse threw her, and she's been walking in this heat all day." Mary McCready was a woman of action. Within minutes, she had Elizabeth settled in the parlor with a cool drink and was examining her for injuries. "Nothing serious, thank the Lord, but you're dehydrated and exhausted. You'll stay here tonight, and we'll not hear any argument about it." Over dinner, simple but delicious fare of beef stew and fresh bread, Elizabeth listened to the easy conversation between the McCreadys and Jake. They talked about cattle prices, weather patterns, and the challenges of ranch life with the natural intimacy of people who would share both hardships and joys. "So you're looking for teaching work?" Mary asked Elizabeth. "We've been talking about getting proper schooling for Bobby. Can't keep teaching him ourselves much longer." "I'd be happy to help," Elizabeth replied, surprised to find she meant it. "I've had excellent education back east." "Whereabouts back east?" Tom inquired. "Boston," she answered quickly, choosing the first city that came to mind. Jake studied her face in the lamplight. Something about her didn't quite add up. Her clothes, her manner of speaking, even the way she held her fork spoke of wealth and privilege far beyond what a governess would possess. But her eyes held genuine warmth when she spoke to young Bobby, and she seemed to fit naturally into the family atmosphere despite her obvious refinement. That night, as Elizabeth lay in the guest room under quilts made by Mary's own hands, she listened to the sounds of the desert night and felt more at peace than she had in years. Tomorrow, she would have to return to her father's world of business and expectations. But for tonight, she was simply Beth Wilson, a woman who'd been saved by a cowboy and welcomed into a home where love mattered more than money. She had no idea that her disappearance had already prompted her father to dispatch a team of Pinkerton detectives to find her, or that Jake Sullivan was about to become the most important person in her carefully orchestrated life. Chapter 2. Hearts in the Desert. 3 days had passed since Jake's rescue, and Elizabeth found herself settling into ranch life with surprising ease. She had convinced the McCreadys to let her stay on as Bobby's teacher, while she waited for word from potential employers in town, another lie that came more naturally than she cared to admit. Each morning, she taught young Bobby his letters and numbers on the kitchen table, while Mary prepared meals and managed the household. The boy was indeed sharp, as his father claimed, hungry for knowledge and eager to please his new teacher. But it was the afternoons that Elizabeth treasured most, when Jake would return from working cattle, and she would find excuses to be near him. "Miss Beth, you sure you want to come out to the corral?" Jake asked as she approached where he was breaking a new horse. "This bron's got some fight in him." "I'd like to learn about ranch work," she replied, settling on the fence rail with practiced grace that belied her supposed unfamiliarity with such environments. "Back in Boston, I never had the opportunity to see such authentic life." Jake noticed how she watched his every movement with intelligent interest rather than feminine fear. Most ladies of refinement would have retreated to the safety of the house at the first sign of a bucking horse. But Beth Wilson seemed genuinely fascinated by the process of earning an animal's trust through patience and skill rather than force. "The trick ain't to break his spirit," Jake explained as he worked with the young stallion. "It's to convince him that working with you is better than working against you." "That sounds like wisdom that applies to more than just horses," Elizabeth observed. Their eyes met across the corral, and Jake felt something stir in his chest that had nothing to do with the physical exertion of horse training. This woman had a way of making even simple conversations feel significant, as if every word carried deeper meaning. That evening, as the family gathered on the porch to escape the desert heat, Elizabeth found herself drawn into the easy rhythm of their lives. Tom McCready played his harmonica, while Mary mended clothes, and young Bobby carved a wooden horse under Jake's patient instruction. "Tell us about Boston, Miss Beth." Mary said, "Must be quite different from out here." Elizabeth's mind raced. She had visited Boston only twice in her life, both times for society functions her father had insisted upon. "It's very crowded and loud. People are always rushing about their business, never taking time to just sit and watch the stars come out. Don't you miss it? Jake asked quietly. No, she answered with surprising honesty. I feel more home here in 3 days than I ever did in back east. Jake studied her face in the starlight. There was something wistful in her expression, as if she were speaking of more than just geography. What about family? They must be worried about you. My father... Elizabeth paused, choosing her words carefully. My father believes a woman should be seen and not heard. He thinks my only value lies in making a good marriage to advance his business interests. The bitterness in her voice was unmistakable, and Jake felt a surge of protective anger toward a man he'd never met. Any man who doesn't value what you have to offer is a fool. Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of approaching riders. Tom McCready stood, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle he kept beside his chair. Expecting company? Jake asked, already on his feet. No, and honest folks don't usually ride up after dark, Tom replied grimly. 4 men emerged from the darkness, their horses lathered with sweat and their clothing marked by hard travel. The leader was a well-dressed man in his 50s with silver hair and cold eyes that seemed to catalog everything he saw. Good evening. The man called out. I'm Charles Hartwell. I'm looking for my daughter, Elizabeth Hartwell. I have reason to believe she may have passed through this area. Elizabeth's blood turned to ice. Her father had found her, just as she had always known he would. But what terrified her more than his presence was the thought of Jake learning the truth about who she really was. Haven't seen any Elizabeth Hartwell, Tom McCready replied carefully. What makes you think she'd be out here? Her horse was found wandering about 5 miles south of here. She's been missing for 3 days. Hartwell's gaze swept over the group on the porch, lingering on Elizabeth with no sign of recognition. In her simple borrowed dress with her hair pinned back plainly, she looked nothing like the elaborately gowned society belle he expected to find. We did help a young lady who'd been thrown from her horse, Mary said. But she said her name was Beth Wilson. She's looking for teaching work. Hartwell's eyes sharpened, and Elizabeth knew her time was running out. She stood slowly, her heart pounding so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. Papa, she said quietly. The word hung in the desert air, like a gunshot. Jake's head snapped toward her, his face a mask of confusion and growing understanding. Tom and Mary McCready exchanged glances, while young Bobby looked from one adult to another in bewilderment. Elizabeth, Hartwell said, his voice carrying both relief and anger. Do you have any idea what you put me through? I've had half the Pinkerton Detective Agency searching for you. I needed some time to think, she replied, lifting her chin with a dignity that had been bred into her since birth. You needed to think? Hartwell's voice rose. About what? Your engagement to Jonathan Blackwood? The merger of our railroad interests? Your responsibilities to the family? Jake felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. Elizabeth Hartwell, daughter of one of the richest men in America, engaged to marry another wealthy man. Everything about the past 3 days suddenly made sense, and none of it. Miss Elizabeth, Jake said, his voice carefully controlled. I reckon you have some explaining to do. Elizabeth turned to face him, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Jake, I want to tell you. Tell me what? That you were lying about everything from the moment I met you? That while I was thinking... He stopped himself, unwilling to reveal his growing feelings in front of her father and the other men. Jake, please. Mr. Sullivan's it? Hartwell interrupted, studying Jake with the calculating gaze of a man accustomed to sizing up potential threats. I appreciate you looking after my daughter. I'm prepared to compensate you for your trouble. The offer hung in the air like an insult. Jake's jaw tightened as he looked from the wealthy railroad magnate to the woman he had begun to care for more than he should have allowed himself. Keep your money, Mr. Hartwell. Just take your daughter and go. Elizabeth felt her heart breaking as she saw the cold distance that had replaced the warmth in Jake's eyes. She had found something real and precious in the desert, and her father's world was about to destroy it just as it destroyed everything else she had ever cared about. Chapter 3. Worlds collide. The Hartwell entourage had taken rooms at the Grand Palace Hotel in Tucson, the finest establishment the growing town had to offer. Elizabeth sat in a luxurious suite. staring out at the desert landscape that had become dear to her, while her father paced behind her like a caged mountain lion. 3 days, Elizabeth. 3 days you've had me worried sick while you played at being a common schoolteacher. Charles Hartwell's voice carried the edge of a man accustomed to absolute control. Do you realize what this could do to our reputation if word gets out? Maybe I don't care about our reputation, Elizabeth replied quietly, not turning from the window. Well, you should. Jonathan Blackwood's father is already questioning whether you're suitable wife material for his son. This little adventure of yours could cost us the railroad merger we've been negotiating for 2 years. Elizabeth finally turned to face her father. What if I don't want to marry Jonathan Blackwood? What if I want to choose my own life? Choose your own life? Hartwell's laugh was harsh. With what? You've never worked a day in your life. You've never wanted for anything. Everything you have, everything you are, comes from the Hartwell name and fortune. I've been teaching Bobby McCready for 3 days, and I'm good at it. I could make my own way. As a school teacher, making $20 a month in some godforsaken frontier town? Don't be ridiculous. Elizabeth thought of Jake's callous hands and honest eyes, of the satisfaction she had felt in helping young Bobby with his letters, of the peace that had settled over her soul during those quiet evenings on the ranch porch. Maybe $20 honestly earned is worth more than all your millions. Her father's face darkened. You're talking nonsense. That cowboy has filled your head with romantic foolishness. But let me tell you something about your honest Mr. Sullivan. I've had him investigated. Elizabeth's heart clenched. What do you mean? He's a drifter, Elizabeth. No family, no prospects, no future beyond working other men's cattle for wages. He fought in the war, came home to find his family farm foreclosed on, and has been moving from ranch to ranch ever since. Is that the life you want? Poverty and uncertainty. At least it would be real, she whispered. Meanwhile, at the McCready Ranch, Jake was working harder than ever. Try to lose himself in physical labor. He rode out before dawn to check cattle, repaired fence line that didn't need fixing, and stayed in the saddle until exhaustion forced him back to the bunkhouse. Tom McCready watched his best hand with growing concern. Jake, you're going to work yourself into the ground. Why don't you take a day off? Ride into town, maybe talk to... Don't. Jake cut him off sharply. Don't mention her name. But you care about her. Anyone with eyes could see it. Jake dismounted and began unsaddling his horse with jerky, angry movements. I was a fool, Tom. She was probably laughing at me the whole time. Poor, simple cowboy falls with a rich man's daughter. Must have been quite entertaining. You don't believe that? Jake paused in his work. I don't know what to believe anymore. Everything about her was a lie. Was it? Mary McCready's voice came from behind them. She had approached quietly, young Bobby at her side. Because the woman who taught my son with such patience and kindness, who helped me with cooking and cleaning without being asked, who sat on our porch and talked about her dreams like they mattered, that didn't feel like a lie to me. Her dreams don't matter, Mary. She's engaged to marry some rich man back east. She'll go back to her world, and that'll be the end of it. Will it? Bobby piped up. Because she left this for you. The boy held out a folded piece of paper. Jake took it with reluctant hands, recognizing Elizabeth's elegant handwriting. Jake, I know you have no reason to believe anything I say now, but I need you to know that every moment we shared was real for me. The woman you met, the one who watched you work with the horses, who felt at home on your porch under the stars. That's who I really am inside. The rest is just the cage I was born into. I'm being taken back east tomorrow to marry a man I don't love and return to a life that feels like death. But I wanted you to know that for 3 days, I was alive. For 3 days, I was free. And for 3 days, I was falling in love with a man who saw me for who I truly am, not what I'm worth. Thank you for saving me from more than just coyotes. Forever yours, Elizabeth. Jake read the letter twice before looking up at the expectant faces around him. She's engaged to another man. She's going back east. End of story. Is it? Tom asked, because from where I'm standing, seems like a woman who'd rather be here with you than there with him. That night, Charles Hartwell made a decision that would change everything. He had spent the day meeting with local ranchers and business owners, ostensibly to discuss railroad expansion, but actually gathering information about the area his daughter had chosen for her rebellion. What he learned intrigued him. The McCready Ranch sat on some of the most valuable land in the territory, perfectly positioned for the railroad route he was planning. More importantly, the local ranchers were struggling financially, making them potentially eager to sell. The next morning, he appeared at the McCready Ranch with an offer that would solve all their problems and remove Jake Sullivan from his daughter's life forever. "Mr. McCready," Hartwell said, sitting in the parlor with legal documents spread before him, "I'm prepared to offer you $50,000 for your ranch. That's twice what your land is worth on the current market." Tom and Mary exchanged glances. $50,000 would be enough to buy a much larger spread in Montana or Colorado, where they had always dreamed of expanding their operation. "Why so generous, Mr. Hartwell?" Tom asked. "I need this particular route for my railroad. Your land is essential to the project." Hartwell's smile was coldly businesslike. "Of course, all current employees will be terminated when the sale goes through." The implication was clear. Jake would lose not only his job, but any reason to stay in the area. Elizabeth would return east, marry Jonathan Blackwood, and this unfortunate romantic entanglement will be permanently resolved. "We'll need time to think about it," Tom said. "Of course. You have until tomorrow morning to decide." As Hartwell's carriage disappeared down the road, Jake emerged from the barn where he had been listening to every word. His face was grim but determined. "Don't sell on my account, Tom. This isn't about you, Jake. This is about our future, our family's security. I know, and I know what I have to do." That evening, Jake Sullivan saddled up Thunder and rode toward Tucson, carrying with him a plan that would either win Elizabeth's heart forever or destroy any chance he had of happiness. Sometimes, he reflected, a man had to risk everything to find out what he was really made of. Chapter 4. Love Conquers All. The Grand Palace Hotel in Tucson was bustling with activity as Charles Hartwell prepared for his departure back east. In her suite, Elizabeth sat in numb silence while her maid packed elegant gowns she hadn't worn in days, each piece of clothing representing a return to the gilded cage she now understood her life to be. A knock at the door interrupted her melancholy. "Come in," she called, expecting her father or perhaps another business associate. Instead, Jake Sullivan stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking distinctly uncomfortable in the opulent surroundings but determined nonetheless. Elizabeth's heart leaped, then immediately filled with dread. "Jake, what are you doing here? If my father sees you, I need to talk to you. Please." Elizabeth glanced toward the connecting door where her father was conducting business. "You shouldn't be here. He'll have you thrown out, or worse." "Let him try." Jake stepped into the room, his presence making the ornate furniture and silk wallpaper seem suddenly artificial and cold. "Elizabeth, I came to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honest. Jake, please don't make this harder than it already is. When you wrote that letter, when you said you're falling in love with me, did you mean it?" Elizabeth's composure cracked. "Of course I meant it. But what difference does it make? I'm engaged to Jonathan Blackwood. My father has already arranged everything. Then unarrange it. You don't understand. I can't just walk away from my responsibilities, my family." "Your responsibilities to who? A father who treats you like property? A fiancé you don't love? Or do you have a responsibility to yourself to be happy?" Before Elizabeth could answer, the connecting door burst open and Charles Hartwell strode in, flanked by two burly men who were clearly hired security. "You have some nerve coming here, Sullivan," Hartwell said coldly. I made it clear that your services were no longer needed." "I'm not here about work, Mr. Hartwell. I'm here about your daughter. My daughter is engaged to be married to a man of proper breeding and social standing. You have nothing to offer her." Jake straightened his full height. "I offer her love, respect, and the freedom to be herself. Can your rich fiancé say the same?" "Love." Hartwell laughed harshly. "What good is love when you're living in poverty? When you can't provide even basic comforts?" Elizabeth was raised in luxury. She wouldn't last a week living on a cowboy's wages. "Maybe you should let her decide that." "I've already decided. Elizabeth said quietly, but her voice carried clearly in the tension-filled room. Both men turned to look at her, and she stood with the grace and dignity that had been bred into her, but also with a strength that was entirely her own. I've decided that I'd rather have one honest day with a man who loves me than a lifetime of luxury with a man who sees me as a business transaction. Her father's face darkened. Elizabeth, you're not thinking clearly. This infatuation. It's not infatuation, Papa. It's love. And for the first time in my life, I'm thinking perfectly clearly. Think about what you're throwing away. Your inheritance, your social position, your future. I'm thinking about what I'm gaining. A man who saved my life and asks nothing in return. A chance to use my education to help children learn. A life where I'm valued for who I am, not what I'm worth. Jake stepped forward. Elizabeth, if you come with me, I can't promise you luxury. I can't promise you'll never want for anything. But I can promise I'll love you every day for the rest of my life, and I'll never try to make you into something you're not. And I, Hartwell said, his voice like ice, can promise that if you walk out that door with him, you'll never see a penny of the Hartwell fortune. You'll be cut off completely. No inheritance. No family support. No way back to the life you've known. Elizabeth looked from her father to Jake, understanding that her next words would determine the course of her entire life. The choice was stark and irreversible. Wealth without love, or love without wealth. Then I choose love, she said simply. Hartwell's face went white with rage. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. No, Papa. The biggest mistake would be spending my life wondering what might have been. She moved to Jake's side, and he took her hand with infinite gentleness. Together, they turned toward the door. Wait, Hartwell said, his voice suddenly tired. Just wait. They paused, and Elizabeth saw something she had never seen before in her father's eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps even fear. Elizabeth, you're all I have left. Your mother's been gone 10 years, and you're the only family I have. If you leave like this... For the first time, Elizabeth heard vulnerability in her father's voice. Papa, I'm not leaving you. I'm just choosing to live my own life. With him? With a cowboy who can't even provide you with a proper home. Jake spoke up quietly. Mr. Hartwell, I know I can't give her the things you can, but I can give her something you've never offered, the chance to choose her own happiness. Hartwell studied Jake for a long moment, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. You really love her, don't you? More than my own life, sir. And you, Elizabeth, you're certain this is what you want. I've never been more certain of anything. The railroad magnate was quiet for several minutes, his businessman's mind clearly calculating odds and outcomes. Finally, he spoke. There's a ranch for sale about 50 miles north of here. Good land, decent house, room to grow. The asking price is $15,000. Jake's jaw tightened. Mr. Hartwell, I can't. It's not for you. Hartwell cut him off. It's Elizabeth's wedding present. Consider it her dowry. But understand this, Sullivan. If you ever hurt her, if you ever make her regret this choice, I'll make sure you never work again anywhere west of Mississippi. Elizabeth stared at her father in amazement. Papa, I don't understand. I understand love, Elizabeth. I loved your mother enough to give up my own family's approval, to marry her. Maybe I've forgotten what that feels like. He turned to Jake. Can you make her happy? I'll spend my life trying, sir. Hartwell nodded slowly. Then perhaps that's enough. 6 months later, Elizabeth Sullivan stood on the porch of her ranch house, watching her husband work with their growing herd of cattle. She wore a simple cotton dress that she had sewn herself. Her hands bore the honest calluses of ranch work, and she had never been more beautiful or more content. The school she had established for the local children was thriving, and she found deep satisfaction in watching young minds grow and flourish under her guidance. Her father visited regularly, having discovered that he enjoyed the honest company of his son-in-law and the authentic happiness of his daughter. As Jake rode up to the house, Elizabeth smiled and placed her hand over her still flat stomach, where their first child was growing. She had given up a fortune to gain the world, and she had never looked back. Sometimes the greatest riches couldn't be counted in dollars and cents, but in moments of perfect happiness shared with the person who loved you exactly as you were. Elizabeth had learned that true wealth lay not in what you owned, but in what you were willing to sacrifice for love. And in the vast, beautiful wilderness of Arizona Territory, love had indeed conquered all,